Welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader. And I know that I was supposed to be reviewing what I thought was a continuation of our book from last week, of A Beauty Dark and Deadly. But I found out that the series Dark and Deadly it's individual stories. So it's 4 books, but they're individual stories. So what we read last week, that was it. I'm a little upset about that because I wanted more, but there's no more for us. So, because I did tell you that I was going to review the second book in that series, I'm still going to do that. But then this is going to be the last one we do from the Dark and Deadly series by Heather C. Myers, and it's called A Reputation Dark and Deadly. We meet Peyton Hart. She is in graduate school. She's studying, I want to say, criminal law. She doesn't want to be a lawyer or police officer or anything like that. She just wants to actually teach. She wants to be a professor. And so she's getting ready to find out who her advisor is in graduate school. There's 3 different professors, and one of them is a badass. His name is Logan Jeffrey. And yes, of course, he is unconventional. He curses all the time. He says pretty much whatever flies through his brain. He's a mess. So this is the first day of class, and she tries to make eye contact. Um, Hold on, let me say this correctly. She tries not to make eye contact with him because he is very attractive, tall, dark, handsome type of guy. Has the whole rugged look thing going for him, but it's kind of terrifying, but it like kind of draws her to him as well. So even though she's heard about him, she knows he has a history of like banging his TAs. She still finds him very attractive. I mean, hell, if you look good, you look good. I mean, it doesn't really change if you're a whore. It's just, you're just a whore that looks good. She's in this class, and he starts going over different cases. She, of course, has knowledge of these. She challenges him on a couple of them, and it kind of makes him take notice of her. It also makes her blush when he starts looking at her. Um, he is impressed with her, because she doesn't like back down from her point of view. So that, I mean, if you believe in it, stand on it. So, most people can't help but respect that. The rest of the class, however, pure terrified. They're terrified of that guy completely. So the student that was named his TA begged Peyton to take the position. And so Peyton finally said, okay, I'll take it. So when she went to his office, he was shocked because that wasn't the person that was supposed to be his TA. And while he was talking to her, some other girl comes in, one of his students, and he's like, looked at her like, what the fuck? He's like, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Like, I'll see you in class. And the girl looked so hurt, and she left. And then Peyton said to him, you're going to have to make it right with your girl. And he let her know, like, I don't fuck students. He told her, I fuck women that can give consent. And again, not students. So she felt all ashamed because, of course, that's not the tea that she had been told. So then after class, she told him that she wanted to meet up so they could discuss the expectations of her as a TA. And he, of course, was like, none of his other TAs had done such a thing, and she was showing her incompetence. Okay, here's the thing. Bitch, I don't know you, right? I don't know what your expectations are. You haven't given me anything in writing that says it, so therefore she's going to ask you. So that's kind of, he's being an ass, clearly. Just a fucking asshole. So then he starts taunting her and saying how much of a goody two-shoes she is, and she decides to prove him wrong. And she smashes her lips against his. And he, of course, was all in. So then he started rubbing her breasts, and he pulled her tit out, and then she pushed him away, adjusted herself, and ran out of there. The next day, she goes to the coffee shop. She goes in the back corner, and one of Logan's former TAs comes up to her, and her name's Carla. And Carla's like, I need to talk to you. And she's like, okay, well, what about? And she was like, well, I heard you were Logan's new TA and that you were his only one. So I guess he's supposed to have 3 TAs, but for whatever reason, he's only got her. And she's like, I don't know, but if that's how it is, it's just how it is. And she goes, well, he didn't pick any other ones. And so the girl comes right out and says, basically, you need to fuck him. That's what she used to do. She understood that there were no attachments, but it'll make your life a lot easier if you just go ahead and do it. Well, our girl Peyton is a virgin. She's 24, but she still hasn't done anything to, lose her virginity. So she, of course, is in shock. Carla's looking at her like, oh my gosh, when she says it to her that she's a virgin, Carla's shocked. She's like, you're a virgin? How is that even possible? Carla starts talking more about some of Logan's past. Carla also kept telling her, like, he's going to really like you. Like, you're really smart, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous. So, I don't know. She's got to have an angle. Don't know what it is, but something's up with her because this just doesn't seem right. Like, unless you and Logan are now friends, and I guess y'all talk about fucking other people, then okay. But otherwise, it just doesn't seem like, I don't understand. You're no longer a TA, but you worried about her fucking him. Like, this just something. 1+1 is always 2, and this just don't add up for me. Carla knows someone in the records department, and so she's able to get information out of his file, which again, if we just fucking, I don't really care about doing deep dives into your life. See what I'm saying? That's what I mean by shit does not match up. He apparently has a really torturous past. His father was abusive. I think he actually took out his mom. In an accident, he was drunk driving and it killed her. He also has a half brother, but he's not really close to him. So they don't really know why he has his brother listed as his emergency contact, but he does when they don't even really talk. But hey, it is what it is. And then we find out that his father died not too long ago because, with that car accident. Afterwards, he apparently didn't last that long. So he was out of here and he went to live with his grandmother. That didn't work out too great. And then there was a period of time, well, really after that, he was on his own. So, makes sense why he has such a hard exterior. Makes perfect sense. We also find out he has these different rules, like he doesn't kiss. A girl tried to kiss him, he kicked her out of his class. And he's done, and he was done. Like, he does not do kissing. So we already know something's different because he let her kiss. He kissed her back. So he also he doesn't use terms of endearment with these women. Like, they have like nicknames. Like, if they got great let's say what's a good one? Like, if a girl has red hair, he'll call her Red. Like, he doesn't give them terms of endearment, but he calls Peyton sweetheart. Doesn't call her by Peyton. So already we know there's some major differences here. And then, of course, that night she goes home and Peyton masturbates to him, thinking about him fucking her in the classroom, and comes pretty hard. Next day, she's in her office, and in comes Mr. Logan. He's really pissed at her. He tells her that she needs to be more careful about talking to students outside of his office. And he apparently made a comment about her flirting with this guy named Brad that's in one of his classes. And she, of course, is like, what are you talking about? There was no flirting. He asked me a question. I was answering it for him. And he basically was like, well, to the outside world, it could look like anything. And he's like, it doesn't matter what you meant for it to be. It's about how it appears. Now, to me, this just sounds like he didn't like the idea of somebody else being close to her. But, of course, he's not going to say that. He's got to make it be about the whole you're a TA and the guy's a student thing. And the whole thing, and he is right, you do have to be conscious of things. You don't even want it to look like impropriety. I totally get that. I totally get that. She hadn't thought of it that way. She said, cool, no problem. I'll make sure I don't do it anymore. So then they go to class. And there's another case that they're talking about, a RAPE. So he's reading someone, he's having someone reading the complaint. And to me, this was like so inappropriate. He wanted to do the reenactment with her, right? So the person in the complaint was describing being on her back. So he had Peyton come up, get on the desk, and be on her back, spread her legs, and put them on his shoulders. I don't know. That's crazy. I mean, I get you want to see visuals. I mean, bitch, you could have drew a drawing. I'm just saying, like, that is so crazy of how that is. And so, of course, she could feel that he was hard. So clearly, you just wanted to get her in that position. That's just so crazy to me. He had said something slick to her, and she kind of said underneath her breath, fuck you. But no one else in the class could hear, but he heard it. So when the class was dismissed, he told her, you better watch your fucking mouth. I'm still your professor, and I'm also still your advisor. So you need to be mindful of how you talk to me. But then she yelled at him. Oh, this is the part I forgot about in the class. Not the class, I'm sorry. In the office, they had gotten into this little argument because she was saying how basically you need to talk to me with more respect. He of course was like, why do I need to do that? Why do I need to do that? And he's like, she was going to say something else to him, but then she starts kind of fumbling her words a bit. And clearly there's so much going through her head after that kiss on both of their sides, but neither one of them are going to say anything. So after he told her, about watching her mouth after class, she storms out or whatever. So it's the weekend. She's decided, you know what? She's going to this frat party with her friend Ricky. She, of course, doesn't normally do this, but she needs a release. She needs a distraction. And so her friend Ricky is like, let's go to this party. So she agrees. So we find out her friend Ricky is also in the criminology program, and that she had Logan Jeffries' class the previous semester, and she was in love with this man. And she thought that he really liked her because she claims he would always stare at her. And apparently everyone knew he liked brunettes, which she is, and Peyton's a blonde. So they're talking about this, and Peyton hasn't told her, of course, about the kiss because she knows it will probably destroy the friend Ricky. And I get it. Your girl likes this guy, but the guy didn't like her. It's still a little crazy. I don't know. I would feel weird doing that to someone if they're supposed to be my friend. I don't know. I just feel weird. Because they were into this guy. I don't know. But then again, maybe it was just like a little schoolgirl crush. I don't know. Even though I know they're adults, but I guess with the dynamic, it could be viewed that way as a schoolgirl crush. But anyway, I digress. So they get to the party. And Ricky is shiesty as fuck. I don't like her. Okay. A guy came up to them, asked them about if they wanted a Ruby. I guess it's some type of drink with a bunch of shit in it. And she, of course, is like, the Ricky girl says to her, like, oh my gosh, I know you're a virgin, but don't act like you're that innocent. So this pisses me off because, first of all, you shouldn't have put her business out there like that. That was not your place. And immediately she tries to do the whole, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And I'm like, no, you did. You knew exactly what you were doing. Because then she starts asking her questions like, you're his only TA. That's never happened before. And what does he call you? Like, she starts like grilling her with all these questions. So clearly there's some animosity there. And there's jealousy. And this is clear. And this is why I automatically feel like you ain't shit. Like, this is more than likely not your friend. So there's a guy named Chuck. He keeps coming around bringing them drinks, and our girl Peyton's getting drunk. So she got sick of being called a goody two shoes, and then she started drinking a lot more, which I'm like, that's where you cannot be concerned with how people view you, because you're now about to put yourself in a vulnerable state for fucking what? You know what I'm saying? If your girl's drinking, she can't really help you either. I don't even think she would want to be honest. So now you're putting yourself in a fucked up type of a situation. You're losing control, is my point. And all because some people were coming at you about being a goody two shoes. That's wild. So the Chuck guy comes. He's been apparently following her all night. He starts leading her upstairs. She tells the dude, I'm not going to sleep with you. So she's still coherent enough to let him know, like, that's not happening. And he's like, oh, I know. I just want us to go somewhere quieter. Get in the room. Of course, you already know he tries to take it. He winds up ripping her dress. And then, boom. Who pops open the door? Logan Jeffrey. We switch to Logan's POV, and you know how much I love that. So then we find out how he got to the party, what led to this whole thing. So we find out that Carla had called Logan, and he was at the batting cage. Now, she had called his phone, and he would not answer, but because she kept calling, he was like, all right, well, let me eventually just answer the freaking phone. Let me just call her back. So he called her back, and she tells him, you need to get down here because Peyton's in trouble, right? And he's like, she's an adult. Like, he was trying to act like he didn't give a shit, but we all know he did. Carla shoots him the address, and then he comes there. She leads him upstairs, and keep in mind, our great friend Ricky is nowhere to be found. Because she was drunk as hell, but like I said, I don't even believe if she wasn't drunk, she was going to be there for that girl. I don't think it was going to happen. And that's how he winds up busting her through the door. He's pulls the Chuck guy off of her and winds up picking her up, carrying her out, putting her in his Suburban, and then he takes her back to his apartment. So she wakes up. She's in a bed she's not familiar with, which makes her shoot up straight. She's looking around the room. Girl don't know where the hell she is. In walks Logan. And she's like, of course, where am I? And why am I here? And she's like really confused. So then he's like, you're at my place. And she's like, why am I here? And then she's like, oh my gosh. She was like, don't tell me my first time and I can't even remember it. And he looked at her with hurt because he's like, how could you even think I would take advantage of you when you clearly couldn't give consent? He's like, I'm a huge, fan of consent. And then she felt bad and was like, I'm sorry. And he's like, you're doing a lot of that, this whole apologizing. So then he tells her how he found out she was there. Because she, of course, was like, how did you find out? He told her the story. And he's trying to figure out what Carla's angle is, because Carla always has an angle that's going to benefit her. She wanted to know what he meant by that, but he didn't go into any other detail. He told her about her friend Ricky, because he's like, yeah, your own friend was nowhere to be found. He's like, the Ricky, yeah, some friend she is. Yeah, braids. That's what he calls her, braid, because that's what she always wore, braids. So that was her nickname. And so he tells her, yeah, she's crazy anyway. He was like, because she tried to come on to him in front of people, and when he turned her down, she started screaming hysterically, flipped out. And he's like, yeah, she's not who you think she is. So then that could be, I don't know. I'll think conspiracy in a minute. But I kind of feel like maybe that's why she wanted to take her out, to get her drunk, to show, I don't know, how some people be like, oh, you act like you're so perfect and you don't do anything and all this type of stuff. Maybe it's because they don't necessarily do it. Or if they do it, it's not your fucking business. You know, some people want to see your scars, right? If they don't see them, they get upset, you know, especially if they've got a ton of them. So the Ricky girl, she just, from the bat, she never seemed like a real friend to me. He let her lay back down, and he's like, basically, I'll feed you something when you wake up. And so she went back to sleep, woke up, and she went and took a shower. And while she was in the shower, it really hit her like I could have been RAPED. Like, she wouldn't have been able to fight that dude off of her. And she realized, I don't ever want to let myself get to that space of being out of control again. Like, that's not going to work, you know? And she starts crying, getting it all out. And then she didn't want to put the dress back on. So she wound up putting on one of his shirts. And so when she came out of the bathroom, he saw her, and of course his eyes are on her legs because he's a legs guy. And he's like, "Oh, I made her something to eat," and he fed her some breakfast burritos. And then on her way out, she saw a chessboard, and they were gonna play. And he's like, "Let's make this interesting." So the bet is gonna be, if he wins, then she has to grade the papers from all of his classes instead of just the one she's assigned to. And if she wins, then he has to take her to for a private um, tour of the old Newport jail that this like infamous bank robber, Albert something, I can't think of the last name, she said, that he was held in and escaped. So of course at first he plays really aggressive, but he doesn't know that this girl's been playing chess since she was really young because she used to play with her grandfather. And so she was also on the chess club. So girl's pretty fucking good. So she lets him be aggressive, and of course, she still wins. He of course is in shock, but all he can say is, to the old jail we go. That Monday, she goes to class, but she decides to wear a little mini skirt because she knows he likes legs. So he looks at her, but he doesn't pay her any attention, doesn't talk to her. So at the end of class, she's like beyond pissed. So she storms into his office. And by the time she gets there, she realizes she's acting like a fucking kid. She wanted attention and he didn't give it to her. Like, how petulant. You know what I mean? So she opens the door and he's like, "Can I fucking help you?" And she says no. And he's like, "Well, clearly it's something you want to say because you came storming in here." And she's like, "No, nothing." He's like, "No, stop lying." And then he says to her, he knew why she was there because he didn't talk to her. He didn't give her any attention. And she, of course, didn't want to admit this. And she says all this bullshit about with the skirt, like, I can wear whatever I want. I don't do anything for you. But the truth was, you did do it for him. Yes, you can wear whatever the fuck you want. But you wore that with him in mind because you wanted to see his reaction to you. That's it. But was she going to admit that? No. So then she storms out. A couple days later, she gets sick, so she has to miss class. She sends him an email. He doesn't respond. But guess who comes boom, boom, booming on her door later that day? It's Mr. Logan Jeffrey himself. And he's like, "You weren't in class today." And she's like, "I'm sick." And she looked like hell, too. And she told him, like, "I sent you an email." He's like, "I don't check that." So then they wind up having this little conversation. He's like, "Well, how long am I supposed to expect you not to be here? Not to be there?" And she says, "I'll probably be out the rest of the week." So then they start having this conversation about Carla because he brought up that how did he say it? He knew that Carla had, probably told her everything that she knew, even though he wasn't the one that told her. And then they started talking about the different posters on the wall. She had like Beetlejuice and like the Breakfast Club, and he of course was like, "You're weird." And she started describing how one day when she was really sick, her mom let her stay home, and she got to watch those movies and how perfect it was and how, wonderful it was that her mother allowed her to do that. And he, of course, was like, all parents aren't that way. And then that's when she starts thinking about the whole Carla thing. That's when they start talking about Carla. And he says again that he knows she has some type of agenda, just doesn't know what it is. So he's like, what all did she tell you? And so she told him what Carla had told her. And the whole thing about even him, that she needed to fuck him, that it was going to make her life easier and all this type of crap. And he's good in the bed, so it'll be a good, experience. And he now knows she's a virgin, but she wasn't talking anymore about it because she made the comment, about the whole virgin thing. And he was like shocked. And then he was like, wait a minute, you can't drop a bomb like that and then not say anything else. And she's like, oh, I'm just so tired. I'm just so sick. I'm not going to be able to talk anymore. He's like, well, you need to get it together. You need to get better because we got a date coming up and I don't reschedule. The day has arrived for him to take her to the old Newport jail. And so she was late getting to the gate. He was waiting for her by, I guess, the front of the gate in the university. And she was stuck in the office because she was talking to the Brad guy again about schoolwork. And so she runs out. She knows Logan's going to be pissed. And when she gets to him, he, of course, is pissed. And he's like, you better be fucking glad I waited, And she's like, it's not my fault I got tied up with a student. And he's like, let me guess, it's the Brad guy again. And he's like, he's only doing that stuff because he likes you and all this type of stuff. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that ain't got nothing to do with me. I don't see that. You know what I mean? Like, to her, she's just answering this question. She doesn't see any other bullshit happening. They get in his car. They're on their way to the jail. He's still a little grumpy, but eventually he calms down a little bit. But then when they get to the actual jail, they're outside and they're having this real conversation. And he says to her, why don't you be fucking honest for once and say that you love the idea of kissing me and that you want me to hold on, and that if you found out I was fucking somebody else, it would piss you off. And so she says to him, if at first she says, if you fuck somebody else, that's your business. That has nothing to do with me and da 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 da. And he, of course, is like, just fucking admit it. Like, he wants her to tell the truth. And then she turns around on him and says, you want me to admit some shit? Then how about you really admit to the fact that you fucking really like me and you like kissing me. And yes, you want to fuck me, but you also have feelings. So they both stare at each other for a moment. Don't say anything. And then finally she says, yeah, if you were messing with somebody else, yeah, it would bother me. I know I shouldn't care, but it would bother me. And he doesn't say anything. And she's like, I was honest. Why can't you be? And he's like, I never agreed to that. So then they go up and Brad's brother is there. And he's like the person over the jail. He takes them in. And Brandon makes a comment to her and says, like, when like he stepped away, Logan stepped away for a minute, like, he never brings women here, like, wow. So, because he's like the only family member left, Brandon, his half brother. So then they do their thing, and of course she loves it. And he just, of course, says to her, you're just so fucking weird. Like, he just could not understand why she was having so much fun on this tour. But here's the thing. When you're interested in something, it is what it is. You're going to geek out. If you put me in a library with a bunch of books, I'm going to geek out. That's just what's going to happen. So then when they're left alone, they have this like intense kiss. And he says to her, you're so fucking delicious. And she's like, Logan, please. And then Brandon like clears his throat and they stop. And she's in her thinking in her head like, shit, I got some stuff to think about on my way home. So after they get caught kissing, it's like maybe 15 minutes left of the tour. Then Logan goes to use the restroom, and she's left there with Brandon. And Brandon comes over and he says to her, that him and Logan used to share women back in the day, and that the whole reason he brought her here was basically to pass her off to him. Like, he was done with her and to pass her off. And she starts thinking, like, at first she's like, no, there's no way that could be true. But then it's like, oh my gosh, she's been going to the restroom for a minute. Like, maybe this is what's going on. So then the guy, Brandon, tries to kiss her. She pulls away from him. He gets more aggressive, and so she knees him in the crotch. So then Logan comes around the corner. He's looking like, what the fuck is going on? She doesn't say anything. She's like, I'm ready to go. So they leave, they get in the car. He can tell something's wrong with her. He's like, tell me. She won't. And then she, in her brain, she starts thinking like, was that shit true? Like what Brandon was saying to her? And if so, then there's no point in telling him because he doesn't care anyway. So then she starts spewing off, about how he doesn't really care about her. And, like she knows he doesn't do relationships, but she's about monogamy and that's what she wants and all this type of shit. And he says to her, like, how the fuck do you know what I want? Like, I've never told you in this. You're just assuming based off of what other people have told you or what they think of me. But you haven't asked me one time what I want. And he says to her, what happened? And she realized that what the brother had told her was a lie. Because he kept saying to her, like, don't you get it? You're fucking different. It's different with you, And she then started crying. I don't know. I guess it got to her. I don't know. But she started crying. And then, of course, he's like, tell me. You got to tell me what happened. So he's like, sweetheart, you got to tell me. You're freaking me out. So then she told him what happened. And the dude went lethal. And he just dropped her off. And when I say lethal, he had this lethal look in his eyes. He dropped her off. He didn't say anything. She, of course, starts blaming herself like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said anything. I just ruined everything. Here's my thing. This is what didn't make any sense. And this is why she should have thought. But I know when things are happening, sometimes it's kind of hard to process everything. But when that dude said, when he's done with them, he passes them off to me, bitch, you ain't even fucked him. So that can't be true. Because he hasn't fucked you yet. So it's like, right there, you knew it was bullshit. It's crazy. 3:00 in the morning, she hears banging on her door. And yes, it is Logan Jeffrey. He's drunk. She could smell the alcohol. He comes in, doesn't say anything, just goes and sits on her bed. She's noticed that he's hurt his hand, and she asks him what happened. He doesn't say anything, and she's like, well, we got to get you to like the emergency room. And he's like, for what? And she's like, because you've hurt your hand. He's like, well, I don't want to. And she's like, well, then you need to leave because you're not going to sit here and be hurt and I not do anything. So he agrees to go. So they go to the emergency room. When they get there, well, when they're in the parking lot, they have this little kiss. She stops and then he kisses her back, and then they go inside. They handle everything. It's not broken, but it's fractured. And then they go back to her place, and while they're in the car, she's looking at him, and it's raining. It's this whole moment. And then he tells her, if you keep looking at me, like, I'm gonna like put you over my shoulder. I'm gonna take you inside. I'm gonna fuck you in your bed. Girl couldn't stop looking at him, so he did just what he said. Scooped her up with one hand and took her inside, started kissing her, doing everything, and made it a very pleasurable, beautiful moment to the point of where that girl was like, oh, I see why people love doing this. And for that to be a first time and it felt that way, dude knows what he's doing. So she woke up the next morning. Of course, she's like, oh my gosh, I am not a virgin anymore. She felt a little sore. She went to take a shower, came back. He started eating the pussy, fucked her again. Then they fell asleep. And there's a knock on the door. She goes to answer it. It's Brad. She, of course, has to like keep him outside because the minute he steps inside, he's going to see who's laying in her bed. So Brad asks her out. He's like, I know we can't do anything right now, but like after this quarter's over, like, would you be willing to like go out with me for coffee or something. And she's like, this is totally inappropriate. And she told him, I can't do that. She's like, I'm seeing someone. And he's like, of course you are. He's like, I'm so sorry. This was stupid. And he leaves. So then, of course, when she turns around, Logan is awake. And he's like, what the fuck was that about? And she told him what happened. And he's like, he's just looking to get himself in real trouble. And she's like, why? Like, he's not going to get in any trouble. He's like, oh, yes, he is. He's like, he's going to get in trouble with me. So then they fuck again against the wall. And he says to her, like, I'm yours and you're mine. That's it. He didn't stay the night. He went back to his place. And then she saw him for the first time on Monday in class. She covered up the hickey or the bite mark that was on her neck. He noticed it, of course. And so after class, when everyone left, he came over to her and he's like, why did you cover it up? Or I think maybe she went to his desk. I think she went to his. And he's like, why did you cover it up? And she's like, well, I don't need that on my neck while I walk around. And he's like, why wouldn't you? He's like, I gave it to you. And she was like, listen, I don't need to be basically paraded around like a cow that you've marked. And he's like, pretty much like, he's like, but you're mine and I'm yours. So what's the problem? He's like, you shouldn't be concerned about what other people think. And her thing was, I don't want people thinking that, like, that I'm getting a good grade because I'm fucking you and your tenure and I'm your TA and your student as well. This could cause issues with you, a breach, with your contract. He's like, he was kind of like, oh, you're really concerned about me. And she's like, duh, you don't get that? So then he starts kissing her. The door opens. She drops down underneath the desk. It's Carla at the door. Carla doesn't know she's in there. And then she gets this little thought that she's going to suck this man off while he's talking to her. So Carla's like, talking about bringing up Peyton, and she starts talking about Brandon. So apparently she knows Brandon, and she's like, you really fucked him up, because he broke his brother's jaw. And she's like, he just wants to make it right, and he doesn't want these type of problems with you, like, just give him a chance. But then she was kind of like, what did he do to Peyton? And he's like, well, why didn't you ask him that, Then she starts asking him, like, why do you care about her so much? And she started to name the different people that he'd slept, the other TAs that he had slept with through the years. And she was like, what makes her so much better? And he's pretty much like, you need to stop worrying about my shit, leave me alone. And he's like, nobody's making up with Brandon. You need to stay away from Peyton as well. Like, stop worrying about it. And then he told her to get the fuck out, so she left. And of course, when she left, he was able to like come in Peyton's mouth, and she swallowed every drop. So then he tells her, like, I don't ever want anything to happen to you. Like, pretty much I'll always protect you and not to worry about anything. And especially not about Brandon, whether he's sorry or not. Well, of course, our girl Peyton decides she wants to try and fix things between Brandon and Logan, because that's Logan's only family member left, so she wants to fix it. So she fucking calls Carla. I think Carla knew her ass was in that fucking room, and I think that's why she said it. That girl is clearly conniving, so because her asking those questions, like, what makes her so special? Let me tell you something. If you just fucking somebody, you don't care nothing about them, you are not going to ask them, why is this person you're now fucking so special? What makes them different from everybody else? That is not a response you're going to have. That is a response you have when you want to figure out why the fuck you're not picking me, because I'm the one that wants to be chosen. And that's just what it is. So that bitch is clearly up to no good. But you know what? Her scheme worked, because fucking Peyton calls Carla. Carla knows she's lying when she says that she's told Logan. She knows it. But she's like, okay, I'll set it up. You'll meet at the old jail, the old Newport jail, at 9 o'clock tonight. Now, why the fuck would you meet somebody at 9 o'clock at night? If you apologize, and you can apologize to me. You could do it over the phone. You can send a note. You can send an email. I mean, I'm just saying, Why do I have to come to the old Newport jail at night. That's fucking crazy. But her ass, even though something's telling her, you better not do this shit, she still fucking goes. She lies to Logan, tells him she's going out with a friend, and then she's going to see him afterwards. So then, of course, when she gets there, Brandon pops up, mouth fucked all up. It's wired. So he writes down, thanks for coming. She follows him to an office. Again, why the fuck are we going into an office? Why you can't just tell me you sorry right here? Why do I have to go somewhere with you? See what I'm saying? All of this is telling her, don't do it, don't do it. Her dumb ass still fucking does it. So she goes into his office and he starts typing on the computer and it's, voicing what he's typing, right? And so at first it's saying that he's sorry, but then it's blaming Logan, saying, he overreacted and all this type of shit. And then he starts saying how Logan killed their father, that he was the one that pulled the plug. So we find out there's all this animosity because apparently Logan's mom and dad, okay, so they were together. Then he cheated on Logan's mom with Brandon's mom, and he was going back and forth. And then Logan's mom was like, nah, fuck that. You got to make a decision, right? So that's when he killed her in the accident. And so Brandon clearly has like all of this animosity towards Logan. So basically, he just wants to try and destroy Logan. So when Logan brought Peyton to the jail, he knew, oh, this is somebody he gives a fuck about, which means what? I can hurt him. Because all this time he hadn't been able to hurt him. What you understand, like if a person they don't have anybody that you give a fuck about, they can't do anything to you because you don't care. So that's what all this bullshit is about. So he apparently is going to RAPED her over and over again, use her up. And when he's done, he's also going to take video. And he's going to send it to Logan. All this type of shit. Before he tells her what he's gonna do to her, she should have broke out. As soon as that bitch started saying he killed my father, that bitch should have took out of there. She should have just dipped. So as he's saying this stuff, he already has her pinned down because she didn't run out earlier like she could have. So he's got her pinned down and he's having this conversation on the phone with her. So the good thing about the phone conversation is that while he's on the phone with Logan, he's distracted. And so Logan's just trying to keep him talking. And it's working. And that's how she's able to break free. So she hauls ass out of there. But he catches her, hits her in the back of the head. I think he had hit her some other places before anyway. And then she turns around and she knocks the, crap out of his jaw. That put him on the floor. And she had already taken her cell phone. So she gets in her car and Logan's still on the phone and she just says hospital. And so she drives herself to the emergency room and then she passes out. Everything goes black. So she woke up in the hospital. Logan's, right there. Of course, he's like, why the fuck did you do that? He's like, I know why you did it. He's like, but you got to understand that certain things you cannot fix. What Brandon did to you when we came that day, that was to get back at me. He finally saw an opportunity to hurt me. And he told her he figured out something was going on because Carla had called him and told her that she was going to go see Brandon and all this type of stuff, that Peyton was going to see Brandon. And she had called him initially when she initially called him to come and get Peyton at that drunken party thing. She did that because she wanted him to see Peyton as this young kid, because apparently him having one TA was something, right? And that meant he ain't gonna be fucking nobody else, no other TAs, right? Because there's none of them there. So that sparked her interest. So she was trying to kill it, right? She's trying to remove his interest from Peyton. So she figured if I show her as this drunk, out of control young girl, he's going to lose interest. But he didn't do that. So now we got to find another way to do it. That girl, that's psychotic. And that's a real problem. And if you're willing to go to those links, which I think they planned, Brandon and Carla, I think they planned what he was going to do to Peyton. And that is just sadistic. So she, of course, is apologizing to him. He's like, stop apologizing, you know? And she's like, no, just let me fucking apologize. But then he expresses to her the helplessness of the situation, of how he felt, you know, not being able to get to her. Like, that was gut-wrenching for him. And he, of course, said the whole thing about, you're mine, I'm your boyfriend, if that's what we got to call it, fine. He's like, if you want me to meet your family, I'll do it. You know, they're probably going to have an issue with the fact that I'm 15 years older than you. And she's like, no, as long as you take care of me, you treat me right, they'll be fine. He paid the copay. She also had told him she loved him. He didn't say it back, but he says other stuff. Like, he'll say to her, like, the fact that someone I love could be hurt this bad. He says stuff like that. So it's like indirectly saying it. Some people have a hard time saying those words. He paid her copay, took her back to his place. They had a nice bath, this nice intimate moment. And then they had a nice little fuck in the tub. And she tells him, I love you again. He says, I know. It made me laugh when I read his response, which is so funny. They did have a conversation about if he pulled the plug on his dad, and he was like, yep, because he deserved it. And I understand, if that's something you can't deal with. And she told him, I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. What you did, who you fucked, none of that matters to me. I was like, damn. They go to class. He goes in first. She waits a few minutes because she's always late. And he calls her out and he's like, what, is your boyfriend making you late? Maybe you need to have your boyfriend buy you a watch for Christmas. And she goes, who said he's my boyfriend? But he didn't bother her for the rest of the class. That pretty much was just for show. So then afterwards, he went, locked the door. Girl got on her knees, started sucking his dick. They had this hardcore hot fuck session on the desk. Great scene to read. Really was. And then after they're done, they're about to leave out. There's a knock on the door. She went and hid back underneath the desk. And it was detectives. The detectives asked, why was your door locked? I thought that was against policy during, school hours. And he's like, I had to grade papers. I didn't want to be fucking disturbed. And if you hear me saying fucking a lot, it's not me. It's because this is how he talks in the book. It's a filthy mouth. And so the cops are like, when was the last time you heard from your brother Brandon? And he says, the last time was when I called him to do a favor, to take my TA to the jail for a tour. They, of course, asked, do you have a habit of taking your TAs to places? And because they knew his reputation. And he says, no, I wasn't fucking my TA, but he thought that I was, and he was always trying to get back at me, so he tried to attack her, and then he just attacked her a few days ago because he was thinking they were together, and they weren't. And they were like, and what about Carla? They said her last name, but I can't remember. And he said, yeah, we used to fuck. That's about it. And then they were like, well, did you know your brother and Carla, were fucking? And he was like, no, but I don't give a fuck. Like, that has nothing to do with me. And they were like, well, he asked, well, why are you here? And he's like, they were like, well, at 2:32 a.m. this morning, we found your brother and Carla in bed, both deceased. And it looks like Carla took out Brandon and then she took herself out. And the minute Peyton heard She knew it. She knew he had taken them both out. And the detectives were like, okay, well, this seems pretty, cut and dry. And they left. But before they left, they, of course, gave their card and were like, if you um, think of anything, please give us a call. But we think the case is pretty much closed. So he closes the door when they leave. She looks at him and he looks at her with a smirk, and that is how it ends. Now, I'm not saying you should take people out, but what I'm saying is Carla and Brandon were demented. Okay? They were. They weren't going to stop. So, I mean, what do you do? Because for Carla to go to those extremes, to try and she planned this whole thing to set this whole thing up, right? And drew the Brandon boy in because she knew there was this animosity between the two of them. So I can't feel real bad that that's how you go out. You shouldn't, that's how I knew she was lying when she was saying oh, I don't, he doesn't do feelings and I'm fine with that because it's just sex to me. I knew she was lying. She felt something for him and it pissed her off as well that he didn't feel the same way. And that's just the truth. So that's how that ends. If you guys want to read the other two books in the series of Dark and Deadly, feel free. I'm probably going to read them on my own. I'm just not going to review them. But let me know what you thought of this book. Drop down in that comment section and let me know. If you have any suggestions as well, put those in the comments as well. And I'll look them over and hopefully future reviews, I'll get to one of those books or series. If you are in the market for a beautiful journal or notebook, I do have a link available for those, and that's going to be listed down in the description section below. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.